The courthouse in downtown Cedar Falls, Iowa, had seen its share of ugly mornings, but this one carried a different weight. Even before the doors opened, tension lingered in the cold January air. Reporters gathered on the stone steps, murmuring into phones, breath fogging as they waited for the K-9 unit to arrive. Inside, the courtroom lights hummed faintly, casting a pale glow over polished wood benches and the raised judge's seat that loomed like a silent authority over everyone who entered. This wasn't an ordinary trial. The defendant, Marcus Hale, sat at the defense table in a wrinkled gray suit, wrists cuffed, jaw tight. He had been charged with armed robbery, arson, and aggravated assault. The evidence was strong, but the prosecution's final move was controversial: a police dog identification in open court. Some called it dramatic, others called it dangerous. Everyone agreed it was risky. At precisely 9:12 a.m., the side doors opened. Deputy Evan Brooks stepped in first, tall, broad-shouldered, his expression rigid with discipline. At his side walked Rex. The German shepherd moved with calm precision, paws silent against the tile floor. His coat was dark sable, streaked with gray around the muzzle, signs of age and years of service. A thick black leash connected him to Brooks' gloved hand. Rex's eyes scanned the room methodically, trained to notice everything and react to nothing. Whispers rippled through the gallery. "That's him. That's the dog. They say he never gets it wrong." Rex had a reputation: 12 years on the force, 37 successful apprehensions, 0 false alerts. He was considered one of the most reliable K-9s in the state, nearing retirement but still sharp. Today was supposed to be routine: walk in, scan, identify, walk out. That was the plan. Brooks guided Rex toward the center aisle, giving a subtle hand signal. Rex obeyed, head level, ears alert. The judge, Harold Whitman, watched closely from the bench, fingers steepled beneath his chin. He had approved this demonstration reluctantly, aware the courtroom would erupt if anything went wrong. And then Rex stopped. It wasn't abrupt, not a jolt, just a gradual slowing, like something invisible had pulled against him. Brooks felt it through the leash. "Rex," he murmured under his breath, giving a gentle tug. The dog didn't move. Rex's ears shifted forward. His breathing changed, slower, heavier. His gaze fixed on the front row of the courtroom just to the right of the aisle. Brooks frowned. "Easy boy," he whispered, trying again. The murmur in the room grew louder. The judge leaned forward slightly. The bailiff adjusted his stance, hand hovering near his holster. That's when a small movement caught everyone's attention. In the front row, seated beside a young woman with tired eyes and trembling hands, a little girl shifted on the bench. Her feet didn't touch the floor. Pink sneakers swung back and forth as if she were bored, unaware of the gravity filling the room. Her name was Lily Carter. 3 years old. She had been brought along because there was no one else to watch her. Her mother, Emily Carter, had tried to find a babysitter that morning, but everyone she trusted was working. She hadn't expected Lily to pay attention. Children rarely did in courtrooms. Emily was too focused on keeping herself together to notice her daughter's growing stillness. Lily stopped swinging her legs. She stared. Rex stared back. For a brief moment, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Then Lily stood up on the bench. Emily gasped softly, reaching for her. "Lily, honey, sit down." But Lily didn't hear her. The little girl's eyes were wide, fixed on the dog in the aisle. Her small fingers gripped the wooden rail as if grounding herself. Her face, round and pale, showed no fear, only recognition. And then she spoke. "Rex." The word was quiet, almost a whisper. But it landed like a gunshot. Every head turned. Brooks froze. The prosecutor stiffened. The defense attorney looked up sharply from his notes. The judge straightened in his chair. Rex's tail dropped. The dog took one slow step forward, ignoring the leash tension. Brooks' heart began to pound. No one had spoken the dog's name aloud in the courtroom. The name wasn't listed in the case file. It hadn't been mentioned in opening statements. Even the media had been instructed to refer to him only as the K-9 unit. Emily pulled Lily down by the arm, panic flooding her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered urgently. "She doesn't know what she's saying." Lily frowned, confused. "But he does," she said, her voice slightly louder now. Rex let out a low, trembling sound. Not a bark, not a growl. A whine. The sound sliced through the room. Brooks tightened his grip on the leash, pulse racing. Rex had never made that sound in public. Not once. Not during riots. Not during shootouts. Not even when he'd been stabbed in the line of duty years earlier. The judge banged his gavel. "Order," he said sharply. "Deputy, regain control of your animal." "Yes, Your Honor," Brooks replied, though his voice betrayed him. Rex took another step forward. The leash went taut. The bailiff's hand moved to his weapon. The defendant laughed nervously from the defense table. "What is this?" he scoffed. "Some kind of circus." Rex didn't look at him. His eyes were locked on Lily. "Rex," Lily said again, softer now, "it's okay." The dog lowered his head. Gasps echoed across the room. Judge Whitman's face hardened. "Ma'am," he said to Emily, "remove your child from the courtroom immediately." Emily stood, shaking, lifting Lily into her arms. Lily didn't protest. Her eyes never left the dog as her mother backed toward the exit. As they moved, Rex strained harder, nails scraping faintly against the floor. "Rex, down," Brooks commanded, his voice sharp. The dog didn't obey. That was when something inside Brooks broke open, an old memory clawing its way to the surface. Smoke, heat, darkness, a child's cries echoing through a burning apartment. His grip faltered. The courtroom erupted into chaos, shouting objections, the judge hammering the gavel repeatedly. And just as Emily reached the doors, Lily twisted in her mother's arms and spoke one final sentence, 4 simple words that froze everyone mid-motion. "You stayed with me." Rex let out a broken sound and dropped into a sit, eyes shining. The doors slammed shut. And in that stunned, breathless silence, Evan Brooks realized with chilling clarity that this trial was no longer about evidence. It was about a past that had just walked back into the room. The courtroom was frozen in disbelief. Even the air seemed to hold its breath, thick with tension, as if waiting for someone to break the spell. The judge's gavel still hovered in midair after the last frustrated bang, echoing faintly against the high wooden walls. Deputies shifted uneasily, exchanging worried glances, while the defendant, Marcus Hale, froze mid-laugh, the sudden intensity of the moment piercing his bravado. He had thought today's proceedings would be routine, a display of authority, a performance that would ultimately convict him. He had not expected a toddler to steal the spotlight. Brooks, the handler, tightened his grip on Rex's leash, heart hammering against his ribs. The dog's focus had shifted entirely, his powerful body tense, muscles coiled like springs. The years of training, the countless hours of obedience and exposure to chaos, all pointed to one fact. Rex was recognizing something, or someone, in a way Brooks had never witnessed in a courtroom. Emily Carter clutched her daughter tightly, lifting Lily off the bench as the bailiff approached, ready to escort mother and child out. But Lily didn't resist. Her small fingers reached toward Rex, trembling slightly, and the dog's gaze followed her every motion. It was as if the air itself had thickened, the room suspended in a strange, fragile equilibrium, where nothing could move until the truth was acknowledged. "She's never met a police dog before," Emily whispered to herself, voice shaking. "She doesn't even know what to say." Yet Lily's voice rang clearly through the courtroom again, small but unwavering. "You remember me." The words cut through the murmurs and whispers of the spectators, who had been craning their necks to understand the sudden commotion. Reporters scrambled to turn on cameras and start recording, but the moment felt sacred, fragile, as if cameras could shatter it. It wasn't just a courtroom drama. It was something primal. Brooks stepped closer, trying to regain control. "Rex, heel," he commanded, his voice firm but tinged with uncertainty. Rex, however, remained rooted, ears perked, eyes locked onto the tiny girl. The chain leash pulled taut, but the dog did not budge. He lowered his head slightly, nostrils flaring as if inhaling a memory long buried. The judge, Harold Whitman, adjusted his glasses, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Deputy Brooks," he said, voice rising with authority, "control your K9. This is highly irregular." Brooks swallowed, forcing himself to stay calm. Inside, panic clawed at him. He had handled Rex through riots, armed standoffs, and drug busts, but nothing had ever prepared him for this. Something instinctive, impossible to explain, had overtaken Rex. The dog's focus wasn't on commands or fear or aggression. It was entirely on recognition. "Your Honor," the prosecutor, Helen Matthews, interjected, "we may be witnessing an unexplainable coincidence. The child, she couldn't possibly—" Her voice trailed off as she glanced at Rex, who was now letting out a low whine, one that resonated deep in the chest and gut of everyone present. The defendant, Marcus, scoffed nervously. "This is ridiculous. Animals don't remember anything like this. It's a trick. You're all being played." His voice faltered as Rex shifted, moving another step closer to the center of the aisle, muscles still coiled, tail lowered but stiff. There was no aggression, yet the air was charged, every eye fixed on the improbable scene unfolding. Emily whispered again to Lily, trying to coax her to leave. "Honey, let's go, please, come on." But Lily's tiny hand waved her mother off gently. "No, Mommy, he knows me," she said firmly. Her eyes, wide and sincere, didn't blink. They bore into Rex, unflinching. It was then that Brooks felt it, the memory that had been clawing at the edges of his mind, rising with clarity and force. 3 years ago, a blaze had ripped through a small apartment on the outskirts of Cedar Falls. Rex had been called to assist in a high-risk rescue. Smoke filled the corridors, flames danced across the walls, and the screams of a trapped child echoed from a second-floor room. That child had been alone, frightened, pinned beneath the broken frame of a crib. Rex had stayed with her until firefighters arrived, barking and nudging her gently with his nose to keep her calm. He had been the last thing she had seen before she was pulled to safety. The handler's face paled. Could it be possible? Could this little girl, this toddler, barely old enough to speak in full sentences, be the very child Rex had saved? The idea was preposterous, and yet Rex's behavior left no room for doubt. "Judge," Brooks said, voice shaking slightly, I think this child may be the one Rex saved in the fire." The courtroom erupted into whispers, gasps, cameras flashing frantically. Marcus Hale's jaw went slack. The defense attorney pounded his notes in disbelief. "Your Honor," he shouted, "this is absurd. We can't allow this. Is manipulation." The judge banged the gavel again, commanding silence. "Order. All rise, please. Let's maintain decorum while we figure out what is happening." Rex whined again, louder this time, pressing forward, his powerful chest brushing against the polished floor, eyes never leaving Lily. It was more than recognition. It was memory, loyalty, instinct. Emily, tears streaming down her face, tightened her hold on Lily. "It can't be," she whispered, to no one in particular. "She's never met him before. How does she know?" The murmurs of the courtroom grew frantic, spectators craning for a better view. The bailiff took a step forward, but even he hesitated, uncertain of what action to take. This was no ordinary courtroom disturbance. The air was charged with awe, disbelief, and a flicker of fear. And then Lily's small voice rang out again, breaking through the tension. "You stayed with me." Rex let out a deep, sorrowful whine and sank onto his haunches, a low, rumbling sound that seemed almost mournful. It was a sound that conveyed more than any words could. A promise kept, a bond forged in fire, unbroken by time or distance. For a heartbeat, the room seemed to collapse inward. Every person, judge, jury, deputies, lawyers, spectators, felt it. Time slowed. Marcus Hale's smug confidence faltered. Even the seasoned media professionals seemed momentarily stunned into silence. Judge Whitman's gavel hung suspended. "Deputy Brooks, explain this," he said quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Brooks swallowed hard. "Your Honor, it's him. Rex, he saved her. 3 years ago in a fire, this little girl is the same child." The courtroom seemed to exhale as Brooks' words settled over everyone like a thunderclap. The implications were enormous. Security risks, legal ramifications, the morality of involving a child in a high-profile case, all of it paled in the shadow of what was happening now. And as Emily clutched Lily closer, the little girl whispered one final, chilling question, looking directly into Rex's dark, soulful eyes. "Do you remember what happened next?" The courtroom froze once more, every soul in the room leaning forward, waiting for the answer that only Rex, and the memories of fire, smoke, and survival, could reveal. The suspense hung thick like smoke in a closed room. No one moved, no one spoke, not even the dog, but the story had only just begun. The courtroom was silent, every sound amplified. The soft hum of fluorescent lights, the shuffle of papers, the faint creak of polished wood beneath the bailiff's boots. Lily, perched on her mother's lap, stared at Rex with an intensity that belied her 3 years. The German shepherd's eyes mirrored hers, deep, dark, and impossibly aware, a silent acknowledgement that transcended human language. The rest of the room seemed to vanish. Marcus Hale, the defendant, was suddenly smaller somehow, his cocky smirk gone, replaced by unease that crept down his spine like icy water. Deputy Evan Brooks, gripping the leash with trembling hands, took a careful step forward. "Rex," he said gently, voice steadying despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Heel." Rex did not move. He simply sank slightly, his massive chest brushing the floor, ears relaxed but eyes unblinking, fixed entirely on Lily. He whined again, low and mournful, and the hair along his spine rippled. Brooks' stomach tightened. This wasn't obedience or training. This was memory. The judge leaned forward, whispering into his sleeve. "Explain yourself, deputy. What is going on here?" Brooks swallowed hard, memories clawing their way to the surface. "Your Honor," he began, voice slightly shaking, 3 years ago Rex was involved in a fire rescue. A small child trapped alone was saved because Rex stayed with her. He wouldn't leave until firefighters arrived. That child," he trailed off, glancing at Lily. "That child is here." The courtroom erupted into shocked whispers. Reporters scrambled to record every word, cameras flashing. Gasps and murmurs echoed off the walls. Even the normally stoic bailiff looked as though he'd seen a ghost. Marcus Hale laughed, a forced, nervous sound. "This is absurd," he barked, standing from his chair. "A dog can't, you're making this up. Animals don't remember like humans. This is theater." Rex let out a low growl, resonant and deliberate, and Marcus froze mid-step. The dog's body was tense now, coiled with controlled power, but there was no aggression toward Lily. His gaze, sharp and unwavering, stayed locked on the man. Every instinct in the courtroom screamed that the dog knew something no one could explain. Lily's voice, quiet yet piercing, broke the tension. He cried. The words were so simple, so innocent, yet they carried a weight that slammed into everyone present. The room fell completely silent. The murmurs stopped. Marcus' face paled. Emily Carter's hand flew to her mouth in disbelief. The judge froze mid-sentence, and even the defense attorney, seasoned in courtroom theatrics, blinked in shock. Brooks' mind raced. 3 years ago, during the fire, Rex had found the little girl huddled beneath a collapsed crib. He had nudged her, stayed close, and yes, he had cried. A deep, guttural sound that he'd never produced in public, a sound reserved only for moments of intense distress or empathy. And now Lily had remembered. "Mommy," he cried, Lily whispered again, her small hand reaching toward Rex's muzzle. She touched him gently without fear. The German shepherd leaned into her hand, eyes softening, exhaling a long, steady breath. The gallery was in chaos. Reporters whispered frantically into microphones. Cameras clicked and flashed. Everyone could feel the inexplicable bond forming in the room, past and present colliding in a moment of raw, undeniable truth. Marcus Hale's voice broke the spell, sharper this time, a hiss of desperation. "You're all fools. This is manipulation. This child doesn't know what she's saying." Rex's growl intensified, a low, menacing rumble that reverberated in the polished wood of the courtroom. His teeth were visible, but not in aggression toward the child. No, this was recognition, warning, a declaration of memory and loyalty. The defendant took a step back, instinctively, fear flashing across his features. Emily whispered urgently, trying to remove Lily from the front of the room. "Sweetie, honey, come on, let's go." But Lily resisted gently, shaking her head. "No, Mommy, he remembers." Judge Whitman slammed his gavel. "Enough," he barked, face red. "This child will not be allowed to influence proceedings. Deputy Brooks, regain control of your K-9 immediately." Brooks exhaled slowly, but he did not move toward Rex. Inside, he felt a knot twist in his stomach. He had handled the dog for years, understood every behavior, every nuance. And this was beyond his understanding. Rex's attachment to Lily wasn't obedience, fear, or instinct. It was something deeper. And then Lily said it again, voice trembling but steady. "In the dark." The courtroom went still. Even the bailiff froze, unsure if he had heard correctly. "In the dark," Lily repeated softly, turning her eyes to Rex. "You stayed with me in the dark." Brooks' chest tightened. He remembered every detail of that night, the choking smoke, the panic of the trapped child, the ferocity with which Rex refused to leave her side. Firefighters had later spoken of the dog's unusual behavior, refusing to come out until the child was safe. No one knew the child's name. Records were sealed to protect her identity. And now, here she was, speaking to him in a voice that belonged to a toddler who had just begun to string words together. Marcus Hale paled further. His hands trembled. "This is nonsense, it's ridiculous," he shouted, but his voice lacked conviction now. Rex took a deliberate step forward. His powerful body was tense, but he did not lunge. The chain leash rattled as Brooks struggled to maintain control. He whispered softly, "Rex, heel." But Rex's gaze never wavered. He sniffed the air, lowered his nose to the floor, then looked up at Lily again, ears forward, eyes shining with recognition and memory. The room felt charged, as though every person inside was holding their breath. Cameras flashed, capturing the extraordinary tableau. A toddler and a battle-scarred police dog sharing a moment of pure recognition, bridging 3 years and a near-death memory. Emily's tears streamed silently. "Honey," she whispered, "let's just go." "No," Lily said firmly. Her tiny hand reached toward Rex again. He remembered. Brooks swallowed hard. His voice was barely audible. "Your Honor, I believe this is her, the child Rex saved in the fire." A stunned silence followed. The judge adjusted his glasses. That would mean," he began. His voice faltered as he tried to grasp the impossibility of the situation. Rex whined again, a soft, mournful sound, and sank to a sit, nose just inches from Lily's tiny hand. He exhaled slowly, almost as if letting the courtroom know he was not a threat. He was a guardian. Lily's voice broke through once more, calm yet piercing. "You didn't leave." Every soul in the courtroom froze. No one spoke. The defendant's bravado had evaporated entirely, replaced by a flicker of fear and disbelief. Reporters' cameras clicked furiously, capturing the moment for history. Brooks felt a cold shiver down his spine. It wasn't the fire, not the danger, not even the courtroom theatrics that had rattled him so much. It was the realization that Rex remembered everything, that he had never forgotten that night, that child, That fear, that bond. And Lily, barely old enough to tie her own shoes, had reminded him. The courtroom held its breath. Something unspoken hovered in the air, a question none dared voice. How could a child, a mere toddler, remember something a dog had lived through but never shared? And then in the stillness that followed, Marcus Hale's voice cut sharply, trembling with panic. You're lying, it's a trick. This dog doesn't know her." Rex's ears flicked toward him. His growl deepened, resonant, unwavering. The dog had chosen. He had remembered. He had waited. And the little girl whispered again, in a voice so small yet so certain that it filled every corner of the room. "He knows me. He stayed with me." Every person in the courtroom leaned forward, heart racing. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The past had walked into the present, and Rex, the battle-scarred veteran police dog, was silently declaring the truth. The trial, the defendant, the evidence, all of it, was suddenly secondary. The room now held a single, undeniable reality. The child and the dog had shared a bond that no one could explain, a memory that refused to fade, and a loyalty that refused to be broken. And in that moment, every eye in the courtroom was fixed on a 3-year-old girl and a dog that refused to leave her side. The suspense hung thick. What happened in that fire 3 years ago, and how would it change the trial forever? Everyone waited, breath held, for the next move, and for Rex to tell the truth in his own way. The memory hit Deputy Brooks like a tidal wave, unstoppable and vivid. 3 years ago, a call came in late at night. A fire in a small apartment complex on the edge of Cedar Falls. Flames had swallowed the second floor, smoke curling like serpents through the hallways. Rescue teams had pushed forward, but the floor above was unstable. In the chaos, Rex had been sent in first. Trained, fearless, and relentless, he had moved through the inferno with a single purpose: find survivors. Brooks could see it now, clearly as if he were back in that apartment. The walls blackened, the air thick with smoke. Amid the flames, a small whimper, a crib collapsed under the weight of debris, and a child, pale, terrified, her tiny hands clawing at the remnants of her crib. Rex had nudged her gently, lowering his head to let her touch his nose, his body a shield against the chaos surrounding her. He refused to leave, not when the flames roared, not when the heat seared his coat. He had stayed until the firefighters arrived, until the last of the flames were under control. And then, with a bark of reassurance, he had watched as she was carried to safety. The child's identity had been sealed in the fire report. Only emergency personnel and the handler knew. The Carter family's names had been kept confidential. Emily had requested privacy for her daughter, hoping the trauma would fade in silence. No one outside that night could have known that the little girl saved from the blaze would appear in this courtroom 3 years later and call the dog by name. Now Brooks looked at Lily. She wasn't just any child, she was her. And Rex remembered. The realization slammed into him, leaving him momentarily frozen. He wasn't sure whether to speak or stay silent, but the courtroom demanded an explanation he could no longer suppress. "Your Honor," Brooks said, voice tight, "the child, the girl, was in that apartment. Rex saved her. He stayed with her until firefighters got her out. He's never forgotten her." The gallery erupted in gasps. The media began shouting into their microphones. Even the judge, Harold Whitman, a man with decades of experience, leaned forward, pale and stunned. Marcus Hale, still seated at the defense table, sat rigid. His arrogance had disappeared, replaced by a creeping fear he could not hide. "Objection," the defense attorney yelled. "This is preposterous. We cannot base anything on fairy tales. A dog cannot testify. A dog cannot remember someone for 3 years," and his voice trailed off as Rex growled low in his throat, a sound that sent shivers down the spines of everyone present. The growl was not directed at Lily. It was aimed squarely at Marcus Hale. The defendant's confident smirk faltered. He shifted in his seat, eyes darting nervously to the dog. "It's a trick," he stammered. "They're manipulating a child. This is nonsense." But Rex did not waver. He sat, powerful and still, nostrils flaring, eyes locked on Marcus. Every muscle in his body screamed recognition and perhaps a silent promise: justice would be done. Emily's hands were trembling as she held Lily. "Honey, come on," she whispered, trying to calm her daughter, but Lily shook her head. "No, Mommy, he stayed with me. He remembers. Don't go." The courtroom grew tense, a palpable hush falling over the room. Even the stenographer stopped typing. Everyone knew this moment was beyond ordinary understanding, beyond law, procedure, and reason. This was primal, emotional, undeniable. Brooks stepped closer, keeping a careful hand on Rex's leash. "Your Honor, I understand this is highly unusual," he said quietly, "but Rex's reaction is proof that he remembers the child he saved. He's identifying her, and if necessary, he will identify the perpetrator involved in the fire that endangered her." A low murmur ran through the courtroom. The prosecutors exchanged glances. This was a precedent unlike any other, a child and a dog acting as witnesses together, bridging past and present. The implications were enormous, but for now, all eyes were on the bond forming before them. Then Lily, her tiny voice trembling, spoke again. "He cried," she said, pointing toward Rex. The whine the dog had let out earlier seemed to affirm her words. The room was silent once more, as if everyone collectively inhaled and held their breath. Brooks felt a lump rise in his throat. Rex had never whined like this publicly. The sound had only been heard once before, 3 years ago when he had been trapped in the fire, trying to protect a child from the inferno. Now, he was communicating the memory to everyone in the room. It was raw, emotional, and impossible to deny. Marcus Hale shifted, eyes wide. "This is impossible," he shouted, panic overtaking him. "It can't be. She's just a child. She doesn't know." Rex's growl deepened, vibrating through the polished wood floor. The judge slammed his gavel, demanding order, but even he couldn't ignore the truth unfolding before him. This wasn't courtroom theatrics. It wasn't imagination. It was a living memory. Emily's tears flowed freely now. "It's true, honey," she whispered to Lily. "You were saved by him. You survived because of Rex." Lily's small hands reached out again, resting gently on Rex's head. "You stayed with me in the dark," she said, voice breaking, "and didn't leave." Brooks swallowed hard. He looked at the little girl and the dog, at the impossible bond forming before his eyes, and realized that this trial had changed. No longer was it just about robbery or arson. It was about memory. It was about justice. And it was about a bond that defied explanation, a bond that might very well determine the outcome of the case. The defendant shifted again, pale, his voice cracking. This is ridiculous. Animals don't, they do." Rex rose slightly, powerful and commanding, his body still tense, his eyes unblinking. The growl had softened, but it remained, a deep rumble that warned Marcus Hale. One wrong move, one lie, and the truth would come down like a hammer. The judge, finally regaining some semblance of control, adjusted his glasses and spoke carefully. "Deputy Brooks, step forward. Explain this situation fully to the court. What you are claiming is extraordinary." Brooks nodded, his hand still trembling slightly. "Your Honor, Rex is a highly trained K-9 officer, but beyond his training he has memory. He remembers the child he saved from the fire 3 years ago. The little girl you see before you, Lily Carter, she is that child. He stayed with her in the dark and he never forgot. When she spoke to him just now, he recognized her immediately." The room was silent. The murmurs stopped. The flashes of cameras ceased for a moment. Every eye was fixed on a child, a dog, and the invisible thread connecting them. A bond forged in fire and survival, now undeniable to all. Marcus Hale's jaw tightened. He knew somehow that the courtroom had shifted irreversibly. His confident, smug facade could no longer hide the fear creeping into his bones. The dog's growl, the child's words, the emotional intensity in the room, they were evidence he couldn't deny. And then Lily, tiny voice trembling but filled with certainty, asked a question that made everyone lean forward. "Do you remember what happened next?" Rex exhaled slowly, a soft whine escaping his throat, and lowered his head toward her. The courtroom shivered at the sound, a bridge between past and present, a truth too powerful to ignore. No one spoke. No one moved. The fire, the rescue, the danger, the 3-year separation, it all converged in that room, and everyone understood silently that what came next would change everything. The suspense hung thick and suffocating. Every person in the room, judge, lawyers, deputies, reporters, was aware of one undeniable truth. The bond between a child and a police dog had just rewritten the rules of the trial, and the courtroom would never be the same again. The courtroom was still, but the tension had transformed into something heavier, an almost tangible electricity that made the hairs on the back of every spectator's neck stand on end. All eyes were locked on the small girl in her pink coat and on the battle-scarred German shepherd that had become the center of an impossible story. Marcus Hale, seated at the defense table, could feel the weight of judgment even before the legal verdict was delivered. But it wasn't just human judgment that chilled him. It was the unwavering gaze of Rex, the dog who remembered everything. Deputy Evan Brooks adjusted his grip on the leash. Rex had been calm moments ago, obedient in his restraint. But the moment Lily's voice had broken through the charged air, he stiffened, a silent sentinel ready to respond. His nostrils flared as he inhaled the courtroom scents, Marcus Hale's cologne, the lingering traces of fear, the faint metallic tang of tension. Everything pointed to one conclusion in Rex's mind. This man had been involved in the fire, in the terror, in the violation of innocence. Judge Whitman, clearing his throat, attempted to regain authority. "Let us proceed with caution," he said. "Deputy Brooks, explain how you intend to proceed with the identification." Brooks nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Your Honor, Rex will perform a formal alert. It's a trained behavior he uses only when he identifies a suspect involved in a violent incident or a crime he's been connected to. I've been with him for 12 years and I've never seen him hesitate. If Rex alerts, it is definitive." The courtroom murmured. Cameras flashed as reporters tried to document every word. Marcus Hale's jaw clenched. He tried to smile, but it faltered almost immediately. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "A dog, a child, this is not evidence." Rex's ears flicked toward the man. A low rumble escaped his throat, not aggressive toward Lily, but a warning aimed squarely at Marcus. The defendant froze, a bead of sweat running down his temple. He had faced prosecutors, police, even SWAT raids before. But this primal, unyielding memory, was something he could not control, could not rationalize. Brooks guided Rex to stand at attention in the center of the courtroom, leash taut but controlled. He knelt beside the dog, whispering soft reassurances. Rex exhaled slowly, then turned his gaze back to Lily. The little girl, emboldened by the memory of survival, stood on her mother's lap. Her tiny hand pointed toward Marcus Hale. "He's the one," she said. The words were simple, almost naive in their phrasing, but they cut through the room like a blade. The courtroom erupted. Gasps and shouts filled the air. Reporters shouted questions, microphones captured incredulous exclamations. The defense attorney slammed a hand on the table. "Your Honor, objection. This child is being coached. This is manipulation. This is not admissible." Judge Whitman pounded his gavel, struggling to maintain order. Silence in the courtroom. "Deputy Brooks, proceed with the K-9 alert." Brooks nodded, voice calm, but inside his heart was pounding like a drum. "Rex, identify." The German shepherd stepped forward, his paws silent against the polished wood floor. He stopped in front of Marcus Hale. The chain leash rattled faintly as Brooks held him back, but Rex's body language was clear. He had recognized the perpetrator. He circled once, sniffing carefully, nostrils flaring, ears alert. Every muscle in his body radiated focus. Then finally Rex sat, solid, firm, hard, the trained alert. one that deputies relied on for confirmation of violent offenders. Silence fell so suddenly that it was almost shocking. Marcus Hale's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The defense attorney looked as though he had been physically struck, staring at the dog in disbelief. Even the judge's gavel felt insufficient in controlling the sudden avalanche of tension. Emily Carter gasped, tears streaming down her face. She clutched Lily tighter, whispering, "It's him, baby, it's really him." The prosecutor, Helen Matthews, finally stood, composing herself. "Your Honor," she said, voice steady, "the K-9 alert is admissible under established procedures. Rex has been trained and certified. He has never produced a false alert in his career. This identification is legally binding." Marcus Hale's eyes darted around the room, panic rising. This is impossible. I didn't do it. It's a dog. A dog can't remember. You can't." Rex let out a low growl, unyielding. He didn't lunge. He didn't bark. But the message was clear. Truth had chosen its messenger, and there was no escape. Lily, emboldened by the dog's affirmation, pointed again. "He hurt Mommy," she said, voice small but resolute. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Emily broke down, sobbing openly. Deputies rushed to restrain Marcus, who struggled in disbelief. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, and the judge banged the gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Yet the truth was undeniable. Rex had made the identification. Lily had spoken. The defendant's guilt was no longer a matter of debate. It was crystal clear, etched in the memory of a survivor and validated by the loyal K-9 who had never forgotten. Brooks exhaled slowly, releasing the tension in his shoulders. He knelt beside Rex, rubbing his head. "Good boy," he whispered, his voice filled with reverence. Rex leaned into the touch but did not break eye contact with Marcus Hale. The judge finally composed himself enough to speak. "The K-9 alert is accepted. The child's testimony, in combination with the dog's trained identification, will be entered into the record. The court acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances. Proceed with caution, all parties." Marcus Hale slumped back into his chair, white-faced, muttering incoherently. His defense attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but even they both knew that the tide had turned irreversibly. Brooks guided Rex back to the front, letting the dog settle beside Lily. The child reached up and touched Rex's head gently, a bond forming in full view of the courtroom. The dog leaned into her small hand, sighing softly. Emily's tears flowed freely as she whispered, "Thank you for keeping her safe." The gallery watched, rapt and silent. In that moment it was no longer a courtroom. It was a scene of raw emotion and unshakable truth. A survivor, a loyal dog, and a man facing the consequences of his actions. Then Marcus Hale made a last-ditch attempt at defiance. This is manipulation. A dog, a child, it doesn't matter, you can't." But Rex's growl interrupted him, low, resonant, unwavering. The message was unmissable. The truth was here, and it could not be denied. And Lily, tiny and trembling but resolute, whispered again, "He hurt Mommy. You stayed with me." The courtroom froze once more. The moment was etched in history, a convergence of courage, loyalty, and memory that no one would ever forget. The verdict was no longer a question of evidence or law. It had been determined long before the judge could speak. Marcus Hale had been identified. The fire, the assault, the destruction, all had been witnessed, remembered, and affirmed by a child and the dog who refused to forget. Rex rested his massive head gently on Lily's lap. The world outside could wait. For now, justice had a voice, and it spoke in the form of a 3-year-old survivor and a loyal German shepherd who had never left her side. The courtroom still vibrated with tension, though it had shifted from disbelief to a quiet, heavy acknowledgement. Something extraordinary had just occurred. Marcus Hale sat rigidly in his chair, face pale, hands trembling as he realized the full scope of the identification. The room no longer buzzed with casual murmurs or scattered whispers. Every eye was fixed on Rex, the German shepherd, and Lily, the tiny survivor whose words had shattered the defendant's bravado. Deputy Evan Brooks kept his hand on the leash, heart pounding. He had been in countless high-pressure situations, riots, armed standoffs, hostage rescues, but nothing had ever felt like this. The intensity wasn't just danger. It was raw, emotional truth, unfurling in a courtroom that had never before witnessed such a moment. Emily Carter held Lily tightly. The girl had grown quiet after her identification, still trembling but now filled with a strange, determined clarity. "Mommy," she whispered, "he stayed with me. He never left." Emily's tears fell freely, her body shaking as she tried to hold herself together for her child. She had replayed the fire 1,000 times in her head, imagining what could have gone wrong. Now, with Rex by Lily's side, she felt an overwhelming mix of relief, fear, and awe. The judge, Harold Whitman, adjusted his glasses, trying to maintain composure. He cleared his throat. "The court acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances. Deputy Brooks, please remain at the front and ensure Rex's behavior is recorded and verified for official documentation." Brooks nodded. He looked down at Rex, whose powerful head rested lightly on Lily's lap. The dog's breathing was calm but measured, eyes alert, still tracking Marcus Hale. Brooks whispered softly, "Good boy, stay with her. Always." Rex's eyes flicked briefly to Brooks, then returned to the defendant, a silent promise that he had not forgotten. Then Lily's small voice broke the silence, trembling yet firm. "He hurt Mommy." The courtroom reacted immediately. Gasps, murmurs, and flashes of cameras swept the room. Emily sobbed openly, hugging her daughter as the truth became undeniable. She leaned down, whispering softly, "Tell them everything, honey. Tell them what happened that night." Lily nodded, eyes shining with unshed tears. He came in," she said, her small voice shaking. "The fire, the smoke, I was scared. He hit Mommy, I cried. And Rex, he stayed." The words hung in the air, thick with tension. Marcus Hale's face twisted into a mask of rage and panic. "This is lies, all lies," he screamed. "You're making this up." But no one believed him. Not with Rex sitting firmly at Lily's side, trained instincts and raw memory guiding his every muscle. Not with the child recounting events from 3 years ago with a clarity that chilled the courtroom. And not with the deputy silently observing, knowing what had truly occurred in that burning apartment. Brooks stepped forward slightly. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady despite the storm of emotions around him. "The child's statements align with the events of the fire. Rex's behavior confirms it. The K-9 alert he just performed is legally binding and demonstrates the identification beyond reasonable doubt." The prosecutor, Helen Matthews, rose, composed yet visibly moved. "Your Honor, we have extraordinary confirmation. A trained K-9 officer, a survivor child, and corroborating incident records. The defendant's involvement in both the assault and the arson is undeniable. The alert Rex performed today validates the child's testimony, and the court should proceed accordingly." Marcus Hale's hands trembled on the table. He leaned back, breathing rapidly. He was surrounded by legal professionals, cameras, and law enforcement, yet he was powerless against the unrelenting truth, a truth that Rex and Lily had brought into the room in the simplest, most devastating way. Lily, encouraged by her mother, continued, "I remember the smoke. I remember being scared. I thought I was going to die. But Rex, he stayed. He never left me." Her small hand pressed gently against Rex's head again. The dog exhaled, eyes softening, comforting the child in a silent exchange that no one could fully describe. The gallery remained silent, hanging on every word. Even the most cynical reporters found themselves holding their breath, captivated by a story that transcended courtroom drama. It was about survival, loyalty, and the unspoken bond between a child and the dog who saved her life. Judge Whitman cleared his throat. "Given the extraordinary circumstances, the court will take a brief recess to verify the K-9 alert and record the child's testimony for official documentation. All parties are reminded to remain in place. Outside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. Media crews buzzed with anticipation, eager to report on the unprecedented events. The story of a toddler identifying a defendant through a police dog's memory would dominate headlines. But inside, it wasn't about publicity. It was about justice, survival, and healing, three intertwined truths that no legal technicality could overshadow. Brooks knelt beside Rex, gently stroking the dog's neck. "You did it," he whispered. "You remembered her, you never left. You did everything right, boy." Rex exhaled, leaning into the touch, yet his eyes remained on the courtroom, ever vigilant. Emily Carter approached, tears streaming freely. "Thank you," she said, voice choked, "for everything, for saving my daughter, for keeping her safe." She looked at Rex, who tilted his head, as if acknowledging her gratitude without needing words. Lily's small hand reached up again, stroking Rex's head. "You stayed with me," she repeated softly. "I wasn't alone." Brooks swallowed hard, realizing the depth of what had just occurred. Rex had not only saved Lily from physical danger but had provided an emotional anchor for the child, helping her survive trauma that could have haunted her forever. And now, years later, that bond had resurfaced, undeniable and profound. The courtroom was called back to order. Judge Whitman's gavel struck, but the energy remained raw. Every word from Lily, every subtle motion from Rex had transformed the proceedings. No one could deny the extraordinary connection. The defendant was visibly shaken, mumbling to his attorney. But the truth, witnessed by dozens and validated by law enforcement standards, was unassailable. Brooks kept Rex close, knowing the dog's task was not over. The trauma from that night, the identification of the perpetrator, and the emotional support he provided to Lily were all critical pieces of the unfolding story. The K-9's presence was both evidence and comfort, a living link between past and present, danger and safety. Outside the courtroom, cameras captured the tense, emotional moments, but inside it was quieter, more intimate. Lily leaned into Rex, whispering, "You didn't leave me, right?" Rex exhaled softly, resting his massive head on her lap. Brooks allowed himself a small smile, knowing the dog's work had extended far beyond law enforcement. It was personal, sacred, and enduring. As the courtroom proceedings moved forward, it became clear that this case would not be remembered just for its legal significance. It would be remembered as the day a toddler and a police dog rewrote the story of survival, memory, and justice. And for Lily, it was a pivotal moment. The realization that she had not been alone, that someone had always stayed with her, even in the darkest hours. Marcus Hale's protests grew quieter, replaced by the realization that his past actions had finally caught up with him. The evidence was overwhelming. The K-9 alert, the child's testimony, the corroborating fire records. He was facing a truth he could neither deny nor escape. And in the quiet aftermath of the storm, as Lily hugged Rex tightly and Brooks kept a steadying hand on the leash, everyone understood something profound. This trial was no longer just about a crime. It was about the bond between a child and the dog who had refused to leave her side, a bond that had saved a life, revealed the truth, and forever changed the course of justice in that courtroom. The suspense remained palpable. Even with Marcus Hale restrained, the emotional fallout had only just begun. And everyone present understood that the story of Lily and Rex, their shared trauma and unbreakable bond, would echo far beyond the courthouse walls, leaving an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. The courthouse was quiet now, but the tension lingered like a shadow. Marcus Hale had been temporarily restrained in a holding area adjacent to the courtroom, while the K-9 unit confirmed Rex's identification, and the child's testimony was officially recorded. Reporters buzzed in the hallways, frantic to capture every detail of the extraordinary story. A toddler, a battle-scarred police dog, and a crime that had finally met its reckoning. Yet inside, Emily Carter and her daughter, Lily, remained in a bubble of relief and lingering fear, their attention fixed entirely on Rex. The German shepherd, though large and imposing, exuded calm. His ears twitched occasionally, alert to the movements of everyone nearby, but he did not growl or bark. He had completed his official duty, but his focus never wavered from Lily. The little girl reached up and ran her small fingers through Rex's thick fur, whispering softly, "You stayed with me, like you promised." Deputy Brooks knelt beside Rex, voice quiet but firm. "Good boy, Rex. You did exactly what you were trained to do and more. You remembered her and you helped us find the truth." Rex leaned into the touch, but his eyes never left the child. There was pride in his posture and a quiet satisfaction that the work he had begun years ago in the fire, amidst smoke and chaos, was now recognized and validated. Emily Carter hugged her daughter tightly, whispering reassurances into her ear. "You're safe now. Everything's going to be okay." Lily's head rested on her mother's shoulder, tears streaming down her cheeks. But her sobs were mixed with relief and awe, the release of tension that had held her for 3 long years. Outside the courtroom, the media were capturing every second of the story. Helicopters hovered above, reporters shouted into microphones, and social media lit up with hashtags about the toddler who had spoken to a police dog. It was a story that resonated far beyond Cedar Falls. It was about courage, survival, and the extraordinary bond between humans and animals. Back inside, Brooks felt a tap on his shoulder. Judge Whitman was standing there, adjusting his glasses, his expression a mix of stern authority and subdued amazement. "Deputy Brooks," he said, voice calm but deliberate, "this K-9 alert, and the child's testimony is unlike anything I've ever seen. The court will ensure this bond and this evidence are preserved as part of the official record. But you must understand the implications are tremendous. You've set a precedent." Brooks nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand." Meanwhile, Marcus Hale sat in the holding area, still pale and muttering under his breath. His bravado had crumbled under the undeniable evidence of Rex's alert and Lily's statements. He had tried to deny the truth, to manipulate the situation, but the bond between child and dog was undeniable. Even his lawyer seemed unsettled, whispering hurriedly and glancing at the closed-circuit cameras that had captured Rex's behavior. There would be no escape from the truth now. Back in the courtroom, Emily and Lily were preparing to leave when Brooks noticed something. Lily's eyes were lingering on Rex, her small fingers gripping the fur at the base of his neck. The child had calmed somewhat, but she wasn't finished with him, not emotionally, not mentally. She needed reassurance, a sign that Rex had truly stayed with her, that the promise made 3 years ago had been honored. "Lily," Brooks said softly, crouching to her level, "Rex is going to stay with you as long as you need him. He's your friend, your protector." The little girl's eyes widened and she nodded slowly. "He promised," she whispered. "He stayed and he'll keep staying." The courtroom staff and spectators watched quietly, struck by the raw emotion of the scene. It wasn't just a courtroom drama anymore. It was a story of survival, loyalty, and unbreakable bonds. Rex wasn't just a trained officer. He was a guardian, a living testament to the courage and compassion animals can offer humans. As they prepared to leave, Brooks led Rex alongside Emily and Lily, ensuring the dog's focus remained on the child. The media outside were clamoring, and Emily's hands shook as she held Lily close, but the little girl seemed calmer now, secure in the presence of her canine protector. Judge Whitman, standing in the doorway, watched them go with a solemn expression. "May this bond be honored in every record," he murmured to himself. "May it guide justice beyond this day." The court clerk approached Brooks as they walked toward the exit. "Deputy," she said, "everyone is talking about this case. The story will be everywhere. People are calling it the child who spoke to a police dog." Brooks nodded. "I know, but to me it's about her safety. That's all that matters." Emily turned to Brooks, voice trembling but filled with gratitude. "Thank you for saving my daughter, for keeping her safe, and for letting her know she's never alone." Brooks nodded. "It's not just me, it's Rex. He's the hero here, and he's not going anywhere." Outside, the cold January air hit them. Cameras flashed and microphones were shoved in their direction. Reporters shouted questions, but Emily held Lily close, guiding her daughter past the crowd. The little girl's eyes, however, remained on Rex. Every step was a connection, a promise that the events of the past would never be forgotten. As they reached the curb, a local journalist leaned forward. "Emily, what will Lily remember from today?" Emily hesitated, glancing down at her daughter. Lily had grown silent, focused on Rex, who walked calmly beside her. "She'll remember that she wasn't alone," Emily said softly. "She'll remember that courage can come in many forms, and sometimes it comes on 4 legs." Brooks watched them disappear into the crowd, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. Rex stayed close, attentive to the child, eyes scanning for any sign of danger. The dog's loyalty had never wavered, not in the fire, not in the courtroom, and not in the chaos that followed. He had fulfilled his duty in every sense: protector, witness, and friend. Later, as the courthouse emptied, Brooks reflected on the events of the day. The trial would continue, legal matters would proceed, and Marcus Hale's fate would be sealed by the combination of child testimony and K-9 identification. But the real story, the story of survival, courage, and an unbreakable bond, would be remembered far longer than any courtroom ruling. And somewhere in the quiet aftermath, Lily whispered once more to Rex, "Thank you for staying with me." The German shepherd leaned into her small frame, exhaling slowly, a silent promise. He always would. The nation would soon hear of this story, of the toddler and the police dog who changed the course of justice. But for Lily, Emily, and Deputy Brooks, it wasn't about fame. It was about safety, memory, and the unshakable bond that had been forged in fire, tested by trauma, and proven unbreakable in the light of day. The suspense, the tension, the fear, it had all culminated in this quiet, profound moment of connection. And as Brooks finally clipped Rex's leash, the dog remained calm, eyes still following Lily, ready to respond if ever needed. The courthouse had witnessed history, not in the verdict alone, not in the legal arguments, but in the silent, unwavering communication between a child and the dog who had saved her. It was a bond that would endure, a story that would resonate, and a truth that no one could deny. The courtroom was tense, but now a quiet determination hung in the air. Marcus Hale sat rigidly at the defense table, his earlier arrogance replaced by sheer panic. The K-9 alert, Lily's testimony, and the emotional weight of the child-dog bond had stripped away every defense he had clung to. Even his lawyer, pale and anxious, struggled to maintain composure. The evidence was overwhelming, impossible to deny. And Rex, calm but alert, remained by Lily's side, a living embodiment of loyalty, memory, and justice. Judge Whitman adjusted his glasses, voice measured but firm. "This court acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances surrounding this case. The K-9 identification, in combination with the child's testimony and verified records from the fire 3 years ago, constitute compelling evidence. The defendant has been identified as directly responsible for the events that endangered the child and caused harm to her mother." Marcus's hands shook as he muttered, "This is impossible. A dog, a child, you can't." The growl from Rex, low and commanding, cut him off. Not aggressive, but a reminder. The truth had been uncovered, and no amount of protest could erase it. The courtroom fell silent once more, every person watching the unfolding drama with bated breath. Brooks knelt beside Rex, whispering softly, "Stay calm, boy, just like before. You've done your duty." Rex leaned gently into Brooks' touch but never let go of the line connecting him to Lily. He knew this moment was far bigger than obedience or training. It was about justice, about survival, about recognition that some bonds could never be broken. Emily Carter wiped her tears, glancing at Lily, who sat with wide, serious eyes. "You did it, honey," Emily whispered. "You helped everyone see the truth." Lily nodded solemnly, her small fingers brushing against Rex's fur. The jury, previously whispering nervously among themselves, now seemed transfixed. They had seen Rex's behavior, Lily's testimony, and the emotional weight that had dominated the room. The evidence was no longer abstract. It was visceral. They had witnessed a bond forged in life-threatening circumstances and reaffirmed 3 years later. The judge called the court to order, his gavel striking with authority. The jury may proceed with deliberation. As the jury filed out, the tension in the room lifted slightly, replaced by a different kind of suspense, the uncertainty of the verdict. Marcus Hale sat hunched, whispering frantically to his attorney, but the confidence that had once filled his posture had evaporated. The room, filled with reporters, deputies, and spectators, waited with an intensity that felt almost unbearable. Brooks remained near Rex, who now sat calmly, yet his posture remained protective, a silent shield for Lily. The dog's presence seemed to anchor her in reality, providing a sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. Even Emily noticed it. "He's still watching out for her," she said softly, almost to herself. "Even now, after everything, he won't let her go." Outside the courtroom, the media waited eagerly, helicopters hovering, cameras flashing, broadcasting the extraordinary story. Social media was alive with speculation. Child and K9, Rex saved me, justice with 4 legs. Yet for Emily, Lily, and Brooks, the attention was secondary. The story was personal. It was about the bond that had saved a life and revealed the truth in the most unexpected way. Hours later, the jury returned. The room fell silent, tension cutting through every heartbeat. The foreperson stood, voice steady but heavy with the weight of responsibility. "We, the jury, find the defendant Marcus Hale guilty on all counts, including arson, assault, and endangerment of a minor." A gasp ran through the courtroom. Emily covered her mouth, tears streaming freely. Lily's small voice whispered, "We did it." Rex stayed. Rex exhaled softly, resting his head gently on Lily's lap. He had fulfilled his duty, but his eyes remained vigilant, scanning the room, ever the protector. Deputy Brooks felt a lump in his throat. The dog had not only identified the criminal, he had reassured a child that the world could be safe again. Marcus Hale was led away, his protests futile against the weight of truth and evidence. He glanced briefly at Rex, a flicker of fear in his eyes. The dog remained calm, eyes steady, muscles relaxed but ready, a silent sentinel that had delivered justice without violence. Outside the courtroom, reporters and cameras clamored for interviews. Emily held Lily close, and the child's small hand found Rex's fur again, stroking it gently. Brooks knelt beside them, watching the bond flourish. "He's yours now, kid," he said quietly. "He'll always watch over you." Lily's face lit up, a mixture of joy and relief. "I know," she whispered. "He stayed, he promised." The story went viral within hours. A toddler who remembered the dog that had saved her, and a K9 who had recognized the child and identified the perpetrator years later. Across the nation, people were captivated by the tale, a reminder of courage, loyalty, and the extraordinary capacity for memory and love, even in animals. Weeks later, Emily and Lily were invited to meet with community leaders and other families affected by similar tragedies. Rex, ever vigilant, walked beside them, calm yet protective. Everywhere they went, the story of the child and the K9 served as a beacon of hope, demonstrating that justice could come in forms both expected and miraculous. Lily began to heal, comforted not only by her mother's love but by Rex's constant presence. At night, she would whisper her fears to him, and the dog would nuzzle her gently, a reassuring presence against nightmares and lingering trauma. Brooks occasionally visited, sharing stories of Rex's duties and training, and marveling at the way the dog seemed to understand every nuance of Lily's emotions. Months passed and the case became legendary. Rex received recognition not only from law enforcement agencies but also from the community, celebrated as a hero who had bridged time, memory, and human trust. But for Emily and Lily, the reward wasn't fame. It was survival, healing, and the unbreakable bond forged in fire, trauma, and unwavering loyalty. One quiet evening, Emily watched Lily playing in the yard, Rex lying nearby, vigilant but relaxed. "You saved her life," she whispered to Brooks, who stood beside her. "And not just once, but again today in the courtroom. I don't know how to thank you both." Brooks smiled softly. "You don't need to. He chose this bond himself. And Lily, she needed him just as much as he needed her." Lily ran toward Rex, laughter spilling freely, the shadows of fear and trauma fading in the sunlight. She hugged the dog tightly. "You promised," she said again, "and you stayed." Rex exhaled, resting his massive head on her shoulder. He had stayed. He had remembered. And he had ensured that justice in the truest sense had been served. The courtroom, the fire, the fear, the chaos, they were all behind them now. What remained was trust, loyalty, and the extraordinary proof that some bonds, forged in life's darkest moments, can never be broken. In that quiet afternoon sun, Lily whispered softly to her hero, "Thank you for staying with me." And Rex, loyal and vigilant as ever, simply nuzzled her in reply, the living embodiment of courage, memory, and unwavering love. The nation had witnessed a miracle in its own courtroom. A 3-year-old girl, a heroic K-9, and a bond that turned terror into justice, trauma into healing, and fear into hope. And it would never be forgotten.